Have you ever had a moment that seemed ordinary at first, but later changed your life forever? Imagine coming home after a long, exhausting day, thinking about nothing but sleep, only for a knock on the door to begin a story you never expected. Tonight's story is about a simple request on a rainy night, and how one unexpected moment between a struggling employee and his mysterious boss slowly revealed secrets, pain, and a connection neither of them saw coming. Stay with this story until the end, because what began with a soaked smile at a doorway became a lesson about kindness, trust, and the strange ways fate brings people together. The rain that evening felt endless. The streets shimmered with reflections of yellow streetlights, and water rushed along the sidewalks like small rivers. I had just stepped into my tiny apartment, shaking rain from my jacket after the long walk home from work. My boss's words from earlier that day still echoed in my mind. I know this sounds funny, but sometimes life tests us in strange ways. At the time I didn't understand what she meant. To me, she was simply the confident owner of the small marketing company where I worked, smart, successful, and always composed. She was the kind of person who seemed untouchable by ordinary problems. I tossed my bag onto the chair and sighed. My apartment was small, barely big enough for a bed, a table, and a cramped bathroom, but it was mine. I had worked hard just to keep it. The rain outside kept tapping against the window like impatient fingers. I was about to make tea when a sudden knock echoed at my door. At first I thought I imagined it. Nobody ever visited me. My friends lived across town, and my neighbors rarely spoke. The knock came again, louder this time. When I opened the door, I froze. Standing in the hallway, drenched from head to toe, was my boss. Her dark hair clung to her face, rainwater dripping from the ends. Her coat was soaked, and she held her arms close as if trying to stay warm. Yet somehow she still wore that calm, gentle smile I recognized from the office. "I know this sounds funny," she said, almost laughing softly at herself. "But, may I use your bathroom?" For a moment I simply stared. My boss, the woman who ran meetings with confidence and wore elegant suits, was standing outside my tiny apartment looking like someone who had just escaped a storm. "Of course," I said quickly, stepping aside. She walked inside, glancing around the small room with curiosity rather than judgment. I felt suddenly embarrassed by the peeling paint and mismatched furniture, but she didn't seem to notice. "Thank you," she said, pushing wet hair behind her ear. My car broke down a few blocks away. I tried calling for help, but the rain ruined my phone. Then I realized, you live nearby. She disappeared into the bathroom while I awkwardly wiped water from the floor. My heart was still racing from the surprise. When she came out a few minutes later, she looked slightly better, though her clothes were still damp. I handed her a towel. "You didn't have to help me," she said softly. "Most people wouldn't open their door this late." "It's not a problem," I replied. "Anyone would do the same." But she shook her head gently. "No," she said. "Not everyone." For a while the rain kept falling, making it impossible for her to leave. I made 2 cups of tea, and we sat at the small table. The situation felt strange at first, like 2 different worlds colliding in the middle of a storm. At work, she was confident and distant. Here, she seemed human. Tired. Quiet. After a long silence she spoke again. "Can I tell you something strange?" she asked. "Sure. I didn't just stop here because your apartment was nearby." I looked at her, confused. She smiled faintly, staring into her cup of tea. "I stopped because you're the only person in the office who treats people like they matter." Her words surprised me. "I just try to do my job," I said. "That's not what I see," she replied gently. "I see someone who stays late to help coworkers, someone who never complains, someone who helped the janitor carry boxes last week while everyone else walked past." I shrugged, feeling awkward. "That's normal." "Maybe," she said quietly. "But kindness is rare. The rain continued for nearly an hour. During that time we talked more than we ever had at work. She told me about the pressure of running a company alone after her father passed away. I told her about working multiple jobs before finally landing this one. And slowly, the invisible wall between boss and employee began to fade. But then she said something that changed everything. You know, she said thoughtfully, sometimes people think success means you have everything. But the truth is, success can be very lonely. Her voice carried a sadness I had never noticed before. Before I could respond, thunder rumbled outside and the lights flickered. She laughed softly. This night is turning into quite an adventure. Eventually the rain began to slow. She stood near the door, preparing to leave now that the storm was easing. But before she stepped out, she turned back toward me. You probably think this was just an accident, she said. Wasn't it? She hesitated. Maybe not entirely. I waited for her to explain, but she simply smiled again. Sometimes life puts people in the same place at the right moment, she said quietly. Not because of luck, but because they need to meet. Then she stepped into the damp hallway. The next day at work everything seemed normal again. She was the same confident boss, leading meetings and giving instructions. Yet every time our eyes met, there was a quiet understanding between us. Weeks passed, and slowly things began to change. She started asking for my ideas during meetings. She trusted me with projects she usually handled herself. Co-workers noticed the difference and joked that I had somehow become the boss's favorite employee. But the truth was simpler. That rainy night had shown her something she rarely saw: kindness without expectation. One evening after work she stopped by my desk. "Do you remember what I said about life testing us in strange ways?" she asked. "Yes." "Well," she said, smiling warmly, "that night wasn't just about a broken car or a storm. It reminded me that success means nothing if you forget how to connect with people." She paused before adding quietly. "And it reminded me that sometimes the most important people in your life appear when you least expect them." Months later our small company grew stronger, our team closer than before. The atmosphere in the office changed: less pressure, more support. And sometimes, when heavy rain begins to fall outside the windows, she jokes about needing another emergency bathroom visit. We both laugh. But deep down we know that night was never really about the rain. It was about two people from different worlds discovering something simple but powerful: that kindness can open doors no success ever could. Because sometimes the smallest moment, a knock on the door during a storm, can change the direction of your life forever.